The story began beneath a moonlit sky, where a man stood, declaring that the time had come. His clan, once proud and strong, had been wiped out by the demonic sect. Yet, their struggle to survive had not been for mere survival, but solely for revenge. With a resolute gaze, he stood atop a high tree branch, his eyes fixed ahead. Without hesitation, he leaped over a wall, landing with ease near a fire burning in the bowl torch. A guard stood vigilantly nearby, unaware of the creeping danger. As shadows began to move, hands began to emerge from the darkness, and in a ruthless finality, he snapped the guard's neck. He muttered to himself that it wouldn't take long before the sentry's disappearance was noticed, but by then, his task would be complete. The bloodshed continued in the distance, and with it, the air grew thick with tension. Elsewhere, an old man, deep in meditation, heard the noise from outside and remarked that it was unusually loud. His eyes opened, revealing a deep and unnerving red. Kang Woon-cheon went in as he observed the old man's calm demeanor with disdain. He couldn't believe the heavenly demon remained unmoved, meditating while his subordinates were slaughtered. To him, the old man was heartless, but the demon's words were calm as he replied. He noted that the same could be said of his opponent. He questioned whether a man, while ascending a mountain, would concern himself with the insects beneath his feet. Of course not, the old man explained, for his gaze would be fixed on the peak. It was the mindset required to reach the pinnacle of martial arts. Woon-cheon scoffed at the old man's words, dismissing them as nonsense. He made it clear that today, he would take the old man's life with his own hands. The old man, the heavenly demon, was unfazed. As Woon-cheon moved forward, a blue aura began to emanate from his hand. He prepared the heavenly lightning fist, a technique that charged up powerful lightning within his palm. With swift precision, he launched his attack directly at the heavenly demon's face. However, the heavenly demon raised his hand in response, stretching it out in a fluid motion. He laughed, taunting Woon-cheon, asking if that was truly all he had. The demon unleashed his own martial art, the heavenly blood-tide art. From his hand, an energy beam shot forward, meeting Woon-cheon's lightning fist in a tremendous clash. The battle between the two martial arts created a force akin to the intense energy battles seen in legendary stories of old. Despite Woon-cheon's overwhelming power, the heavenly demon's energy surged past him, striking him in the face. He felt the burn of the attack and immediately recognized the energy beam for what it was, a sword energy. With an air of arrogance, the old man claimed that Woon-cheon would join his father today, signaling the end of the battle. Yet, Woon-cheon was not finished. With determination, he began to perform another technique, surprising the heavenly demon. This time, with a swift motion, Woon-cheon unleashed the heavenly divine palm. The powerful strike shattered the energy beam, and Woon-cheon continued his assault, landing a decisive punch directly on the demon's chest. Lightning surged throughout the demon's body, sending him flying into the wall behind him. Panting, Woon-cheon spoke harshly, warning the old man to stop speaking of his father in such a disrespectful manner. He reminded him of the countless lives the old man had destroyed, the evil deeds he had committed, and how this moment of vengeance was not just his own. It was the collective rage of all those the old man had wronged. The heavenly demon, now stunned, retorted that he should have wiped out the Cloud Dragon sect long ago. He was genuinely surprised by Woon-cheon's strength, unable to comprehend how the young man had managed to break through his heavenly demon blood surge art. The demon now realized that he had no other choice. With great effort, the heavenly demon pulled out a gourd, which Woon-cheon quickly recognized. When he asked if it was an elixir, the old man began drinking its contents without hesitation. Woon-cheon warned the old man that consuming such a potent elixir in one go would cause his demonic ki to deviate. A powerful purple energy burst forth as the gourd shattered, the demon's energy overflowing beyond control. His face contorted in agony as his eyes bulged, and with a terrifying roar, he released a shockwave of power. The force of it sent wind rushing outward, forcing Woon Seowoon to raise his hands to protect himself from the fierce blast. The battle had reached its climax, and it was clear that neither opponent would yield easily. The outcome of their clash was now inevitable. The battle between Woon Seowoon and the heavenly demon raged on, and Woon Seowoon couldn't believe what he was witnessing. Just as he turned to respond to the heavenly demon's voice, he realized too late that the attack was already incoming. The heavenly demon, looming behind him, declared that it was time for Woon Seowoon to disappear. As the attack drew closer, Woon Seowoon recognized his helplessness, but suddenly a voice intervened. A barrier materialized just in time, wrapping around Woon Seowoon and protecting him from the oncoming assault. Woon Seowoon's eyes widened as he recognized the protective shield. His surprise was palpable, but before he could react, a man stepped forward, apologizing for his late arrival. He explained that he had gotten caught lazing around. Woon Seowoon called him the Great Mage, but the man immediately dismissed the title, insisting that he had told Woon Seowoon not to call him something so trivial. The mage then turned his gaze toward the heavenly demon, asking if this was the nemesis Woon Seowoon had spoken of. Woon Seowoon responded that indeed, this was the man who claimed to have come from another world, and without him, Woon Seowoon would have already perished. Suddenly, the scene shifted, and the narrative took a jarring turn to reality. A man, Jin Seawoon, could be heard shouting in frustration. He had been reading a Murim-themed novel, enjoying the story until the unexpected appearance of a high-level mage from another world shattered his immersion. Seawoon couldn't help but complain about the sudden plot twist. He wondered aloud why a random mage from another world had appeared out of nowhere. His irritation grew as he sighed, lamenting that he had been enjoying the story until that moment. The appearance of this new element seemed like a mood killer. Seawoon expressed disbelief, questioning how it made sense for an entire world to just appear out of nowhere. His thoughts were clear. The author must have been on something, he mused, to come up with such an implausible plot. His phone buzzed with a notification, and he glanced down, recognizing that his friend had messaged him. Seawoon had been discharged from the military 6 months ago and was preparing to return to college. His friend, eager for a gaming session, invited him to grind ranked matches, and Seawoon couldn't help but wonder why his friend had no one else to play with. Reflecting on his life after the military, Seawoon explained that, like many who had completed their service, he had carefully crafted a plan. He intended to earn certifications and study all the things he had missed while serving. However, he felt disconnected from society, as he had missed out on many of the experiences others had enjoyed. As Seawoon headed into town, he thought about his remaining funds, briefly considering finding a part-time job. Being an avid fan of Murim novels, he often fantasized about living as the protagonist in such a world. He made his way into a PC cafe, where the cashier greeted him by name, asking if he was going to play Loyal Ground again that day. Seawoon confirmed it and ordered 10 hours of playtime. Loyal Ground was the only game he had played during his military leave, and he had spent countless hours grinding it. Within 3 months, he had risen to a top 10 rank, his dedication paying off. He logged into the game and messaged his friend to wait for him in the lobby. Seawoon had even earned some extra cash from tournament prizes at internet cafes. Loyal Ground, a Battle Royale game, was a straightforward game. 100 players dropped from a plane, collected weapons scattered around the map, and fought until only one remained standing. Now in the game, Seawoon began communicating with his friend, directing him to the coordinates where 2 other players were located. He instructed his friend to look towards 120 on the compass, which was displayed at the top of the screen. Seawoon aimed and quickly killed both opponents with 2 precise headshots. His friend shouted in excitement, noting that only 2 players remained. Seawoon chastised his friend for being so loud, recalling that his friend had already been eliminated once. He advised his friend to focus on looting and staying alive, emphasizing the need to find the safe zone before it closed. As the circle shrank, some other players running towards a building. They cautiously entered the building, spotting a first aid kit on the ground. One of them remarked that the presence of loot suggested that the other player hadn't entered yet. But Seowoon was hiding beneath the shadow. The players did not notice someone had hid there. As one player enters the building, aiming to grab some free loot, they discover Seowoon's character sitting in the corner, camping the loot. The player outside hears gunshots and receives notification that his teammate is dead. In disbelief, he mutters that he can't believe the teammate was hiding inside. With no time to trade out his teammate, he begins running away, but before he can get far, a bullet hits him in the back of the head. Now, he's the last one left, earning the coveted chicken dinner. Seowoon's friend, grateful for the win, thanks him for carrying the game. Seowoon, however, simply tells him to queue up for the next match and reminds him that he needs to lock in and start studying tomorrow. As Seowoon's phone buzzes, he looks down at it, and his mother's message appears. She asks if he's studying well and mentions that she sent his academy fees along with some extra money, hoping he eats well. She apologizes for not being able to send more. Seowoon thanks her, acknowledging that it's his mother's love and support. He responds, telling her that he's going to bed soon. Seowoon then tells his friend that he won't be playing anymore starting tomorrow. His friend protests, reminding him that they had planned to participate in a clan war together. However, Seowoon tells him that he can't go because he needs to start attending an English academy. He feels guilty every time he reads his mother's messages, as he's been living in this cycle for months. As he heads back to his apartment, he begins to doom scroll on his phone that night. Among the various videos, he stumbles upon one talking about people with mysterious powers being spotted overseas. These people are calling themselves players. Intrigued, Seowoon clicks the video, but it suddenly disappears. The video got deleted. He finds the situation strange, but decides to sleep it off. The next morning, as he heads out to the academy, his friend calls him, reminding him that they still need to prepare for the clan war. Seowoon tells him that he wants to help in one last game, but before he can finish his sentence, a purple light begins to glow behind him. He turns around, completely taken aback, and wonders what's going on. The light continues to draw closer, engulfing him entirely. His backpack falls to the ground, and not a trace of him is left behind. Now enveloped in the light, Seowoon wonders what it was and whether it's some sort of punishment for waiting too long to make his decision. As Seowoon slowly opens his eyes, he hears people speaking foreign language, and he's immediately startled by the volume. Looking ahead, he sees people fighting with swords and casting magic. They wield all kind of weapons and all kind of different outfits. Completely confused, Seowoon wonders if he's dreaming. He takes in more of the scene around him, spotting a statue nearby. The statue suddenly comes to life, announcing that 100 players have been detected. Still disoriented, Seowoon wonders why he hears a voice in his head and feels that the situation is a bit loud. The statue's eyes glow as it declares that the system is initializing. Seowoon's eyes also begin to glow with a blue hue, still trying to process what's happening. The statue then mentions that the language is being synchronized, and suddenly, the foreign language Seowoon had been hearing earlier is now being translated directly into Korean. In front of him, a large man comments that everyone is now speaking his language. Among the chaos, some characters from the Murim world discuss matters, including two mages. A mage named Chiron asked another named Escrow what he did to get them into this situation. Escrow responds, claiming he wanted to ask Chiron the same question, wondering why he had brought him here. Irritated, Chiron retorts that he won't be fooled by Escrow's words anymore. Unfazed, Escrow states that it no longer matters whether Chiron believes him, because everyone is fated to kneel before the Demon King's power. As the Archmage, Chiron declared that he would make a promise to Escrow as he summoned lightning in his hand. With a fierce look, he vowed to kill Escrow here and then swiftly end the Demon King's reign. He unleashed his ability, the Karen-style lightning, zapping Escrow where he stood. However, to Karen's surprise and confusion, Escrow stood completely unharmed, unaffected by the powerful strike. Karen's suspicion grew as he realized that he must have been the one who brought Chiron to this place. Meanwhile, witnessing the unfolding scene, Seowoon began to feel a creeping sense of disbelief. It was becoming too realistic to be a mere dream. Still looming in the background, the statue spoke again, announcing that the game was about to begin. The difficulty was set to easy, and the objective was explained. They only needed to reach the top 90. The designated map for this game was the kingdom's capital, and the rewards would go to the top 10 players and higher. The statue further explained that the tutorial would be skipped, and in the waiting room, players couldn't attack one another as everything was neutralized. A map materialized before Seowoon as the statue continued. For those accessing the Cloyd Survival game for the first time, it provided a brief explanation. The game would last for 100 years, and each day, the map would become more limited. Exiting the boundaries of the map would result in severe consequences, so players were advised to proceed cautiously. The ultimate goal was to be the last survivor, with the game concluding when only one player remained. If the game ended or a player was eliminated, they would return to their original world. Additionally, players who failed to make it into the top 90 would never be able to partake in Cloyd Survival again. The statue then declared that the players would soon descend to their chosen location with the help of her Gus gaze, allowing them to collect items and use them to reach the top 90. The statue wished them good luck. Still processing everything, Seowoon wondered if he was dreaming about Loyal Ground, the game he had been so engrossed in. His anxiety grew as the status window reaffirmed the rewards for the top 10 and higher. Despite the possibility of this being a dream, Seowoon found himself surrounded by people who seemed all too real, crazy humans who made him nervous. One particularly unsettling figure was licking his knife, a behavior Seowoon found disturbingly strange. He quickly realized that, regardless of whether this was a dream or not, he was in grave danger. Fearful for his life, Seowoon muttered that he didn't want to die, even if this was just a dream. Before he could finish his thought, someone called out to him, addressing him as Messy Hair. The man demanded to know why Seowoon kept looking around and asked where he was from. When Seowoon didn't answer, the man swung his blade toward him. He was offended after being ignored by a skinny man. Just then, the countdown for the game began, and Seowoon smiled, asking why Seowoon was smiling in such a tense situation. He called Seowoon crazy, but Seowoon just grinned back, explaining that there was a simple reason for his smile. He was dreaming such a fun dream. Why wouldn't he enjoy it? With his knowledge of the game, which he referred to as log, Seowoon was confident that he could defeat people like this and survive. The countdown hit its final second, and day 1 of Cloyd Survival began. Players were soon dropping from a high altitude, so toward the massive region of the kingdom's capital. They were covered in a protective barrier, descending toward the battlefield. Analyzing the situation, Seowoon realized they were descending into crowded areas, places abundant with items. However, he decided that starting on the outskirts would be safer. He spotted a house in the distance and quickly shouted, "Descend," before diving straight down toward the ground. In a moment of panic, he screamed and even struck a superhero pose as he plummeted. However, despite the dramatic descent, he was unharmed. After landing, Seowoon paused for a moment, feeling dizzy from the intense motion. He was overcome with motion sickness and struggled to hold back the urge to vomit. His focus shifted to the house ahead. Determined to get inside, he heard rustling in the bushes nearby, which caught him off guard. He bolted toward the house, realizing he hadn't been able to see who had landed with him due to his dizziness. He pushed through the door, finally making it into the house and securing his temporary refuge. Seowoon realized that if he encountered an enemy without a weapon, he would be done for. He quickly closed the door behind him, his chest heaving as he began to pant. He wondered if it was the sword-wielding man from earlier, regretting having provoked him. Looking out the window and seeing no one, Seowoon breathed a sigh of relief, deciding it must have been the wind. Fortunately, he didn't hear anything else, and he was able to calm down and continue moving on. He wanted to begin searching the house. He remembered that items were obtained where players landed, so he needed to look for them here. As he moved forward, Seowoon noticed something beneath him. Looking down, the system notified him that he had obtained a heavy crossbow. It was heavy, but better than nothing. He reached for the quiver, pulled out an arrow, and equipped it. As soon as he did, the method of use naturally came to him. He began reloading the crossbow. As a South Korean Army sergeant, This was nothing for him. Seowoon did exactly that. The shot was incredibly powerful, piercing halfway through the wall and sending him flying backward. He was surprised at how effective it was, as it had penetrated deeply into the wood. If he learned to use it properly, it could be a useful weapon. After looking around more, but finding nothing else, he decided to move on. The map was vast, and he knew if he didn't run into enemies at the start, he could safely farm the area. He raised the crossbow and carefully cleared the house in front of him. On a table, he spotted a scroll and moved over to examine it. It was labeled a healing scroll. The scroll was small, and the system explained that if he ripped it, his injuries would heal. Seowoon could hardly believe such an item existed. He wished he had an item bag to carry more recovery items. Then his eyes fell on a glowing purple book on a shelf nearby. He picked it up, and the system informed him that he had obtained the Black Star Energy Palm's martial arts book. This martial art allowed him to project dark energy through his fingers. The system asked if he wanted to learn it. Seowoon immediately accepts the prompt to use it, wondering if it would trigger a tutorial. Right after, the book began to glow vibrantly, and the pages turned before his eyes. As he watched, the book slowly began to disintegrate. Confused, Seowoon looked down at his hands, wondering if that was it. As he stared at his palm, he felt an energy swelling up, growing stronger with every passing second. Curious to test it, Seowoon grabbed a fork from the table and imbued it with energy. He hurled the fork into the nearby wall with all his strength, and it stabbed deep into the wall. He smiled, pleased to have learned a martial art just from reading a book. Seowoon walked over, pulled the fork out of the wall, and murmured that this would be incredibly useful. The existence of martial arts books meant that there were probably magic books as well. Regardless, Seowoon was now certain that Cloyd Survival and Loyal Ground were the same game. After searching the area thoroughly, Seowoon decided to move on. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Seowoon realized he had been farming for some time. He needed to find a place to hide quickly. He looked around and saw a house with its lights on. He figured that the light either meant there was a rare item inside or someone was already there. Seowoon entered carefully, trying not to make a sound. He wasn't sure how many people had landed near him, but if someone was inside, they could either be a complete pro or a complete noob. He listened intently, but he didn't hear anything. He moved cautiously through the house, checking each room before proceeding. Seowoon wondered if the enemies were hiding on the second floor. He felt a growing sense of anxiety, unsure of what he might find. He knew that if he had his weapon and used his Black Star Energy Palms technique, even if they were professionals, he might stand a chance. Slowly, he ascended the steps, doing his best to make no noise. His crossbow was gripped firmly in his hands as he took each step cautiously. Then, just ahead of him, he spotted something, a lantern. His instincts kicked in, and he wondered if it was a trap, especially with a room right beside it. After a brief moment of doubt, Seowoon decided to act. He kicked the door wide open, revealing the bedroom beyond. He looked around the room, letting out a quiet sigh of relief as no one was there. He found a ring on the drawer and picked it up, wondering if it might be an item. The ring was labeled Ring of Strength, which promised an increase of 20 in strength when equipped. Seowoon wondered if it would truly make him stronger just by wearing it. He slid it onto his index finger, immediately feeling a strange sensation. His body felt lighter, almost as if the weight of the crossbow had significantly decreased, even though it had been heavy before. The ring had increased his strength by 20, and he figured he should check his stats. He tried cycling through a few commands, finally managing to pull up his character info. The stats revealed that he was still quite weak. He wondered if his classification as a martial artist was simply because he had learned a martial art. Still, compared to when he had started with nothing, he felt like he had made progress. This was a good sign, and he was glad to have made it this far. Deciding to continue exploring the first floor, Seowoon found a subspace ring, the very item he had been hoping for earlier. He couldn't help but smile as he thought how convenient it was to find yet another ring. He quickly checked the status window, which explained how the subspace ring worked. To store an item, Seowoon had to grab it and either say or think of the word subspace. After that, He could touch the ring with his other hand, and the item would be stored inside. The status window also mentioned that if the subspace became full, he wouldn't be able to store any more items. Seowoon grinned, impressed by the simplicity of the system. It was essentially an inventory system like in the games he used to play. He began to open the subspace in front of him, feeling an odd but intriguing sensation. He decided to store the healing scroll inside, thrilled by the convenience of no longer needing to carry it around in a bag. This system was incredibly efficient, and Seowoon couldn't help but think how much more convenient life would be with something like this in reality. His thoughts wandered to what it would be like to bring back the martial arts and items into the real world. If he could do that, it would be an even bigger game changer than he had anticipated. As he continued to think, Seowoon wondered how many players had been eliminated so far. Looking at the interface, he figured there must be a kill log. He found it and discovered that only one person had been eliminated up to that point. He had initially planned to farm until only 90 players were left, but he had already searched several houses and found a lot of consumable items. His luck had been on his side, and he had even found a number of hidden weapons, which complemented his Black Star Energy Palm's martial arts. While he had gathered a lot, Seowoon knew it was time to move on. Staying in one place for too long wasn't a good idea, especially with the powerful players he had seen in the waiting room. With his current level, he wasn't strong enough to face them. However, if he managed to stay hidden and make it into the top 10, he would have the opportunity to allocate points where they were needed most. Seowoon considered the risk, but he knew that there would likely be fewer players out at night. It was worth taking the chance, especially if he could find another good place before the sun rose. As he exited the house, Seowoon felt a surge of energy. He had been on a move constantly, but he wasn't tired at all. The Ring of Strength had proven to be a game changer. Though his strength had increased significantly, he still felt hunger and thirst, reminding him that Cloyd Survival wasn't too different from reality. He realized he would need to find something to eat soon, and the city should have food for him to grab. With that goal in mind, Seowoon set off toward the city, determined to find sustenance and continue his journey. Every step he took felt a little lighter, and he was more confident in his chances of surviving longer in this brutal world. As the night stretched on, he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. But first, he needed to eat. He could only hope that this new world would offer the resources he needed to stay alive and grow stronger. Seowoon checked the map, realizing he should be somewhere near the location, but he was unsure of where the houses were. He began to hear a wolf snarling in the distance, and quickly realized that the sound was coming from directly behind him. Instantly, he darted into some bushes, cursing himself for not noticing it sooner. He peeked over, seeing the creature in the distance, feeling his nerves spike. Sweat began to bead on his forehead as he recognized that it wasn't just any wolf. It was a werewolf, and there was another one right behind him. As he sat frozen, the werewolf lunged at him, forcing him to dodge just in time. The creature's attack shattered the nearby tree with brutal force, and now there were two of them, staring directly at him. Seowoon muttered to himself that he thought this was a PvP game, never expecting monsters like these to be a part of it. If he had known, he would have stayed put. He was still a ranker, in name at least, and dying to a mob would be too embarrassing. Noticing a house off in the distance, Seowoon ran toward it, his heart pounding as he approached the door. He slammed it shut behind him, panting heavily as he listened to the werewolves outside. He wondered if they would try to get in. The sound of sniffing came closer, and he realized the creatures must be searching for his scent. Knowing he had to act fast, Seowoon cracked the door open, aiming his crossbow through the small gap. He waited until he had a clear shot, and then fired, sending a bolt through the crack and into the side of one werewolf skull. The creature collapsed and began to vanish into the air. Relieved, Seowoon muttered that the Ring of Strength had made it possible for him to fire the crossbow with just one hand. Now he just needed to deal with the second werewolf. As he reloaded the crossbow, he turned to find the second creature had moved much closer, now directly in front of the door. It charged, smashing through the door with terrifying speed, its claws slashing across Seowoon's cheek. He stumbled backward, shocked, as the werewolf broke through the door. The creature moved in for a follow-up attack, and Seowoon quickly raised the crossbow, firing again. But the werewolf raised its arm, blocking the bolt. With his weapon now useless, Seowoon dropped the crossbow just as the werewolf lunged to finish him off. He panicked, realizing this could be how he was eliminated. But then he remembered the subspace ring. Reaching into it, he pulled out an unfamiliar dagger he had stored. Determined to survive, he imbued the dagger with his Black Star Energy Palm's martial arts and hurled it into the werewolf. The energy-powered dagger pierced through the creature with ease, sending it crashing into the wall. As the werewolf began to disappear in front of him, Seowoon exhaled deeply, a sigh of relief escaping him. He had thought he was a goner, but now he was safe. His heart still racing, he collapsed to his knees, muttering that he was glad he had stashed the throwing dagger earlier. He had been sure he would fail and be eliminated by these mobs, which would have been incredibly embarrassing. Seowoon looked down at a small baggie on the floor, noting it must be a mob drop. He opened it eagerly, but inside, he only found water and jerky. He grumbled, wishing it had been something more useful, though at least he had food for now. He started eating, debating whether to check the area more thoroughly. As he explored the building, he found a piece of armor. It was a bit large for him, but once he put it on, it immediately resized to fit his body. The status window appeared, informing him that the item was an advanced orichalcum breastplate, which significantly increased his resistance to fire and wind magic. Seowoon was impressed by how much it boosted his stats, and he couldn't help but wonder if there were even more powerful items hidden around. He continued to search, his curiosity piqued, but when he bumped his knee into something, he stopped. Looking down, he didn't see what he had hit. He kicked the ground in front of him, wondering if it was a hidden item. Seowoon picked up the item, feeling its texture, which resembled cloth. After putting it on, he discovered that it was called the Night Cloak. The moment it was equipped, he realized that if he remained still in darkness, the cloak allowed him to blend seamlessly with the shadows. While hidden, no magic would detect him, and even the sounds he made were muted. The cloak reminded him of something from a familiar fantasy story, an item of power that allowed its wearer to avoid detection. This cloak was invaluable for survival, enabling Seowoon to avoid anyone who might cross his path during the night. It was the perfect tool for remaining undetected, allowing him to stay alive for as long as needed. As he moved through the area, Seowoon couldn't shake his confusion about the house in the middle of nowhere, but after some consideration, he realized it was part of a farming spot. It seemed his luck might be turning around for the better today. Still, as he walked deeper into the woods under the cover of night, Seowoon reflected on how he hadn't seen anyone. Perhaps it was the result of being dropped into a random location. Lost in thought, he heard footsteps approaching from behind. Turning, Seowoon saw a man running through the forest, disheveled and yelling in frustration. The man seemed to be lamenting that he hadn't had the time to use something, though what exactly it was remained unclear. Seowoon wasted no time donning the night cloak again, slipping into the shadows of a nearby bush. The man did not notice Seowoon as he muttered that he couldn't believe he'd encountered a mage in such a place. Seowoon observed that the man appeared weak, a person easily dealt with, and the thought crossed his mind that he could take him down with little effort. As the man turned to leave, Seowoon reminded himself to stay calm. It was just a game after all, and there was no reason to hesitate. Before Seowoon could make a decision, another man appeared and chanted a spell, an escrow flame, directed from Seowoon's behind. The fire struck the man directly in the back, and Seowoon watched, wondering if he had just killed him. However, when the smoke cleared, there was no body, just a chest. This confirmed that they were, indeed, in a game, and the chest likely contained the man's items. The question lingered in Seowoon's mind. Where had the fire come from? At that moment, a figure appeared from behind, a large-nosed man who walked toward the fallen mage. He scorned the dead man for not being able to use magic properly, calling him unlucky. The large-nosed man claimed that if the mage had been killed by a sword, he wouldn't have felt the excruciating pain of being burned alive. Seowoon considered himself fortunate that he had walked past unnoticed. The cloak had indeed proven its worth, and the mage mused that the man who had died might at least be honored to have met his end at the hands of someone as skilled as himself. Referring to himself as Chiron, the large-nosed man bent over to search the fallen mage's belongings. Seowoon quickly deduced that the man was also a player like him. If he wasn't careful, he could be next. It was clear that in this game, hesitation could cost him his life. Seowoon knew the rules. In order to survive, he had to act without delay. As Big Nose sifted through the items, he sensed an incoming attack from behind. His barrier absorbed the impact of the strike, but it cracked under the pressure. The large-nosed man muttered to himself, blaming the mage for causing the noise. Seowoon raised his crossbow, taking aim and firing a bolt, which hit the barrier again, causing it to crack further. Big Nose realized the barrier was close to breaking. He couldn't pinpoint Seowoon's location, but fired a fireball in his general direction, taunting him to reveal himself rather than hiding like a coward. Seowoon didn't respond. Instead, he quickly readied another throwing knife. A second later, a throwing knife flew out from the bushes, heading straight for Big Nose. He heard the sound of it slicing through the air, and although his barrier absorbed the hit, it shattered completely. Panic spread across his face as he turned in search of Seowoon, still calling for him to reveal himself. Seowoon raised the crossbow for another shot. Big Nose started to chant another escrow flame spell, but before he could finish, a throwing knife struck him directly in the forehead. The large-nosed man disintegrated into dust, and the battle was over. Seowoon watched as the man's last words were an attempt to cast a spell, but before he could finish, his head was taken clean off by the attack. Seowoon, still in disbelief, stared at the scene. He had won. Looking down, he noticed 2 loot boxes lying on the ground. He knew that if someone saw the fire and decided to follow the source, it would be trouble. Quickly, he decided to loot the boxes as fast as possible and get away before anyone arrived. Starting with the chest from Big Nose, Seowoon tossed nearly everything into his subspace storage, even picking up another healing item in the process. Among the items, he discovered an escrow's necklace, which marked him as a mage of the Escrow Magic Society. This clarified the confusion surrounding the name. Seowoon dismissed the necklace, calling it a useless item with no properties, and decided to store it for later. As he continued to sort through the loot, one item caught his attention: the Circle Stone. It was an artifact that allowed the user to engrave a circle around their heart, granting them the ability to use mana. Once used, it would enable the user to learn the magic of the circle. Seowoon was intrigued, wondering if using the stone would turn him into a mage. His thoughts then returned to the man who had been running earlier, whose words now made sense where he wished for more time to use this. Seowoon felt a pang of guilt, but decided he would put it to good use instead. With a sigh, he stashed the remaining items into his inventory to review them later, when he found a safer location. Seowoon ventured deeper into the forest, climbing a hill and scanning the area. He needed to find a spot where he could use the Circle Stone. In the distance, he spotted some houses and made his way toward them, thinking they would be a suitable place. Once inside, the stone prompted him, asking if he was sure about using it. Without hesitation, Seowoon confirmed in his mind that he was ready. The stone warned him that using it would require him to remain motionless for 3 hours, unable to perform any actions or use items. It also mentioned the slight pain that would accompany the formation of the circle. The moment he activated it, Seowoon's chest tightened, and waves of intense pain began to surge through him. He stifled his screams, enduring the excruciating agony for the next 3 hours. By the end, Seowoon lay on the floor, drooling from the pain, his body still racked with discomfort. He had expected a mild ache, but the ordeal felt like it might have broken him. He muttered to himself that learning martial arts had been difficult, but magic was on an entirely different level. Once he gathered himself, Seowoon opened his status window. To his surprise, it now showed 2 job classes, and he had unlocked a new stat: mana. He looked at the survivors list, curious to see how many were left. After the 2 men's deaths, the number of survivors should have decreased, but when the list appeared, Seowoon was stunned. Only 45 participants remained, with a name standing out: Nam Sagwon. This person had been systematically eliminating others, taking out nearly everyone on the list. Nam Sagwon went into action just hours earlier. He was perched high in a tree, watching his next victim from above. The man on the ground stumbled over a rock, a comical sight given his size. Nam Sagwon chuckled to himself, enjoying the scene. He was after something simple, getting into the top 90. As the man begged for his life, Sagwon raised his hand, stretching it toward the man's face. In a swift motion, he popped the man's head like a zit, sending a clear message to everyone. They would all come to know his name. With a smug grin, he moved on without looting the body. His only concern was making sure the participants knew who he was: Nam Sagwon, a name to be